Hey, welcome to the Small Business Made Simple podcast, brought to you by socialmediaandmarketing.com.au. Being in business is never easy, but it can be simple, or at least simpler. Join me, your host Jen Donovan, every week where we focus on marketing, social media, and working towards simplifying your business. You with me? Let's do this.
If you're gonna dream it big, 'cause someone out there listening. Everyone's got a voice to give, and it's time I heard you whistling, 'cause there's no point at all, in dreaming small.
Why, hey there, my fabulous listener. Welcome to episode 245 of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. Thank you, as always, for lending me your ears today. I know that you have lots of podcast choices out there, and I do appreciate you putting me inside your ears and listening to my little podcast. If you are enjoying the podcast, then I would love to get to know you like you get to know me a little bit every single week. So if you take a screenshot and you tag me in your socials, or take a screenshot, put it on your socials, and then tag me, then I get to follow your business journey as well, which is pretty cool. Don't forget that all the show notes are at all the W's socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/245. So anything I mentioned today is in the show notes, and you'll find the show notes there. Did you have a chance to listen to last week's episode? Last week, I was chatting to you all about public speaking as a marketing strategy. I had lots of people reach out to me and talk to me about their fears of public speaking. But also really great stories of people just embracing it and getting used to it for the sake of their business, which I guess was kind of my whole message was, you mightn't like doing it, but if your audience really loves to hear from you, then maybe it's something you need to get over and something you need to embrace. Or if you already do public speaking in your business, maybe it's time to take it to the next level. But whichever way it was, I had some amazing conversations created from the podcast episode. If you didn't get a chance to listen to episode 244, then head back there after you've listened to this one, of course. Today on the podcast, I have a terrific guest, Emma McMillan from Emma McMillan Copy. I always love talking to copy experts or experts in the copy field, because for me, it always feels like such a work in progress, and something that I strive to get better at every single day is copy. So always love to talk to someone who's much better and a lot more aligned with copy than what I am. But before I get into my chat with Emma, I wanted to give a shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, who are Airtree Resort. Airtree Resort is actually near me on the Murray River, on the border of New South and Victoria, and is actually owned by good friends Jules and Shane, aka Jules and Scratcher. The resort is a really great place to bring your golf clubs to, bring the fam bam to, have a girls' weekend, have a boys' weekend, have a couples' weekend, have a family weekend, or even a fabulous time during the week as well. You know what? You can even stay there and visit the snow. Like literally during winter, the snow is probably around 90 minutes away from where I live. So snow skiing during winter, water skiing during the summer. We've just kind of got it all. Of course, I have my retreat there. It has really great facilities for any conference that you might like to run as well. But if maybe you're just after a bit of a winter getaway, then check out Airtree Resort. You can find all the details at all the W's Airtree, which is AIRTREE resort.com.au, or look them up on Facebook or Instagram. Of course, the links are in the show notes. But now onto my amazing chat with Emma. She shares with us the number one secret to how to get good at copy. And it's so simple. And yet, for many of us small business owners, it's probably a little bit foreign to our thinking about copy. So embrace all Emma has to say on this podcast and take up her challenge that she mentions as well. So let's get into it. Here's my chat with Emma. I hope you really enjoy it. Hey, Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So looking forward to this conversation. But for my amazing listener who may not have come across you, or just wants to know a lot more about what you do, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So I work as a copy coach predominantly. So I ran a copywriting business for about 5 years. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've transitioned more into a coaching, training, mentoring type of role. And I guess that is because really in my previous career, I was in secondary education. I was a teacher for 12 years. And what I found was that in my business, I really missed that element of teaching and helping to equip people with the skills that they needed to be able to do things themselves and to feel really good about, the writing they're doing for their own business. So these days I work predominantly with small businesses and also with some larger organizations as well, just around helping them to better understand their business so that they can actually get behind the way they talk about it, to learn like the practical copywriting skills, but also just to build their writing confidence and some sustainable habits and things like that, to make writing feel so much more easeful and flowy and fun. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I find that's why I love to have conversations around copy because I find that people really overcomplicate copy. And I'm sure you've got some magic for us to chat about today, but it is about confidence in some ways. Like, I was just working with a client this morning, and, as the business owner, she's a little bit new to social media and she's like, but what do I write? And it's just like, tell me in the words and I will just, speak it, write it type of thing. Let's start there because she was really overcomplicating what it was that she wanted to communicate through that social media post. So, yeah, so I always love copy conversations for this particular reason. But I guess let's start there. How do you build confidence with copy? Like, is there a particular formula? Is there a particular, assets that every business needs? What does it look like?
Yeah. So the first thing I say to people is like, as much as we can, like, let's try and let go of the stories that we've been telling ourselves about, writing. And often it's things that we're carrying around, from school days and things like that, like something a teacher once said, or, some feedback you might have got on an essay that just has, got you thinking all these years, like, I don't know how to write, or I'm not a good writer. I think everyone can write better, and that's what I'm on a mission to help people understand. And I think the first step really, Jen, is about building in that consistency and just starting to make writing a bit more of a habit. So my advice to my clients is just to write something every day. It doesn't even have to be something that's shared or published, but just to get into the habit of actually just writing regularly. And then it starts to take the pressure off, right? Because if you don't write for weeks at a time and then you feel like, oh, I've got to get a newsletter out or I've got to write a social post, you build it up and you make it this big thing. Whereas if you're just writing all the time, then it starts to feel like the pressure just falls away a little bit and it just, it doesn't have as much weight or gravity to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so writing something every day, like stories, like, are you like, is it to gather stories to reuse for social media or for marketing, or is it just basically just write something?
It could be either. It could just be as simple as, writing your grocery list or writing a letter to your partner or your child or something. Or it could literally be giving yourself a prompt and just spending 5 minutes writing on that prompt. So the prompt might be, how do I feel about my business right now? Or why did I start my business? Or those kinds of little prompts. And if you do get on a roll with those, then they can become things that you can then use for like your social media or a story, in your newsletter to your subscribers, that kind of thing. But I think it's about setting it up so that the pressure's not there to have to use it for something, but just to see what evolves out of it. I think that's where, the surprises kind of come, but it doesn't feel like a stressful activity.
Yeah, I feel that we are all restrained by 13 years of English at school and some of the things we were taught. And, God bless the soul of my year 12 English teacher. I don't think she's still alive anymore, but she would hate the way I set out my paragraphs and things like that. Like all of that just sort of goes out the window for me anyway. But what are the common mistakes that people make when it comes to copywriting? I guess, especially from a small business aspect.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many. But the good news is there's lots of easy fixes as well. So I think the very first thing, I know, because I hate to say, things happen all the time, but the first thing is that we can get rid of that formal mindset that we used to write in, especially when we're writing those those Year 12 English essays or those uni, papers and things like that, conversational copy is really in. And as you talked about earlier with your client, getting them to actually talk out loud to, build out the bones of their social media posts, like that is such good advice, just to be able to sort of talk your thoughts out loud and capture them. That really can help you to get out of that sort of formal, stuck way of writing. I like people to think about the idea of copy being a conversation. So it's not just output, it's something that actually invites response, right? So I like to write in the way that I imagine that, it's for one person. So even if I'm writing my newsletter, Jen, I might imagine like someone like you on the other end reading it and actually responding to it. And it just helps it to feel much more personal rather than being, like this really general kind of piece of writing that's not really for anyone in particular. So keep it personal, keep it conversational, using things like contractions in your writing. So instead of that's just tightening language up, so that it's really punchy and that it just rolls off the tongue. That kind of thing helps people to, engage with it much more easily. A lot of the time, small business owners in particular, I find are in the habit too of writing copy from like their perspective rather than the perspective of the potential prospect or audience. So what I mean by that is that a tendency that we have is to say, I can help you with this, or I do this and I work like this and so on. And whilst it's important to talk about what it is that you do, it's about flipping that language so that the customer is really like the central focus. And I always like to ask the question, because this is what's in the customer's mind or the prospect's mind, what's in it for me? So thinking about like what is in it for the audience. And if you can sort of take it from talking about what you offer to actually, well, what is the benefit or the outcome for your audience? That can just really help, again, to engage them more in what it is that you're saying. So they're just a couple of little things. And calls to action. I mean, you probably find this with your clients too, that a lot of people either miss a call to action completely or go crazy with, 20 calls to action on a page, which just, leads to decision fatigue like nothing else, or just not understanding or being comfortable with knowing, what sorts of calls to action to even use. And I think the key there is to not always be thinking like it's asking for a sale, but it's really just like, what's the next action or the next step that you want somebody to take?
Yeah, I think, and that's a good explanation as well for anyone who might be listening and go, what do you mean by call to action? It's basically, what's the next thing? Like they've stopped, they've opened the email, they've read it, or they've read the social media post. What's next for them? How can you get them either micro action or, a big action deeper into your world, I guess. And it doesn't have to be for the sale, but I guess it's all trying to lead them to the sale eventually. We've talked a little bit about conversational copy. I'm not sure whether like sales copy is a specialty or whether it's, something that is it different to conversational copy? Like if you're trying to sell something, does the language that you use or the words that you use look quite different to conversational copy?
That's an interesting question. And I guess it probably depends a little bit on who you talk to. In terms of the way that I've always liked to write copy, I always have that conversational feel, whether or not it's for like a service or sales page, as for something else. But I think it is important to remember that every platform is a little bit different in terms of how you might speak to your audience. So I think it's important for small businesses, especially, to ask themselves, like, what is the platform that this piece of copy I'm writing, what's it for? Is it for like my website, which is my own personal, owned real estate? Is it for something like LinkedIn, which has got a slightly different flavor to your Instagram, for example, which has got a different, audience and perhaps flavor to your emails? So I think it's important to just understand there are nuances between those different types of platforms that you might write copy for, and just to keep those in mind. So I think, when someone comes to a sales page or a service page, they know that they're on that page to look very closely at buying a service. So, they're on there and they understand that the main purpose of that page is conversion, right? Whereas with some other places that they might read your copy, it's not necessarily in that moment asking them for the sale. It might be about building community or building engagement or just building that know, like, and trust with different kinds of, valuable content. So potentially the calls to action might be stronger or might be more prominent, but I don't necessarily think that the tone of the copy needs to change. It's conversational, so long as that aligns with your tone of voice in more general terms.
Yeah, I love that, because as a business person, as a coach, as a marketer, and like, to say that I find it funny is not ha funny, but listening to people and hear their tone change as they start the sales message. So you've had this beautiful little conversation with them, and all of a sudden the tone changes and you're like, I know what's coming. Like, so I think trying to keep sales copy sounding like you really does help with that conversion. So I love that answer that you gave, rather than, yes, it should be completely different and, it should sound like X, Y, and Z, because they're buying from you. Like, unless you're a corporation like the Golden Arches, they're still buying from the Emmas and the Jens of the world. So I absolutely love that. Thank you. So copy, there's so much of our lives as small business owners that involves copy, like you've already mentioned, websites, newsletters, social posts. There's just so much there. But what about repurposing some of that copy? What does that look like? Like, have you got any tips or tricks on how to actually repurpose some of the copy that we might have written 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 12 months ago? Yeah. What are your thoughts on repurposing?
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for content repurposing. Like you, I'm all about creating a business that's sustainable, right? And that actually serves us in the long term. And, if we don't want to just burn out by creating new things all the time, repurposing should be an important part of our strategy, but it doesn't have to be overcomplicated at all. I just want small business owners to think about, if you're spending the time and effort to create something once, you might as well reuse it in different ways to just get the most out of that. The other thing is that, as you would know too, Jen, and you talk about with your clients, that people need to see the same thing or hear the same thing from you multiple times before they take action, more times than ever before. I think it used to be 7. Now I think it's some sort of ridiculous number of touch points that they need to have with you, right? So you want to be saying these similar things. You don't need to worry about feeling like you're repeating yourself either, because the way that the algorithms work, obviously nobody's seeing everything you put out, right? So if you've taken the time to write a really detailed blog article, or you have, got a podcast episode that you've invested time to create, or even if you've got a really high performing social media post, for example, that's quite a chunky one, you can use that to do so many other things. Like, for example, you might pitch that particular topic to someone to go and have a podcast conversation about. Or you might, for instance, take a newsletter that you've sent out and you might repurpose it, which means change it up a little bit and use it on LinkedIn. You might then chop that LinkedIn post into some shorter posts and just maybe add a few emojis and just kind of casual it up a bit. Use it on Instagram. You might even approach somebody and say, listen, I've written a lot about this topic. I've spoken a lot about this topic. Would it be a fit for this community that you run? Could I maybe come and speak to your community? Or would you like a guest blog post on your website about this topic, and so on? And it's about just seeing, like, where else could you be using this content that you've already created? Even like repurposing, for instance, like website copy that you've created into, say, like a speaker pack or a podcast pitch pack. Rather than starting from scratch, we just forget we've already created so much great stuff. Sometimes we don't think to go back and use that. We start from scratch again. So it's about organizing your content. And if you've got it set up in a way where you can find the things that you need, you won't have to start from scratch each time. Like, I was just thinking when I needed to send you, my speaker bio, for instance, like that's saved in a spot where I know it's there because I keep coming back to it. And anytime I need to do anything bio related, I might tweak it here and there, but essentially like the bones of something are already done. So It's about just being really smart, conserving your energy, and making the most of what you already have.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all those ideas for repurposing. I recently went on a book retreat, a book writing retreat,
Oh,
and
fabulous.
it was so good, so good. There's a podcast in it somewhere. I just haven't got to doing or thinking what that could look like. But there was a gentleman there who publishes books, and he's published a book about writing a book, which totally makes sense for a publisher. But what he was actually saying was you could actually go to his website and download whatever there is, 20 or 30 blogs, and that's his book. Or you could buy the book type of thing. So he's kind of repurposed it into a whole heap of blogs. So he said you could get the same information for free, technically, if you took the time to read every single blog on his website, or you could just read the book. And I thought that is such a good repurposing thing to go, I'm going to hit all the markets, the free market, the people who are willing to invest, but just break it up into chunks. And I think having that hero piece of content, which of course you and I have because we both have podcasts, um, then we can sort of keep repurposing from there. But even for myself, just yesterday, actually, I was looking for an Instagram post that I know that I did. And I actually thought it was last year, but COVID has buggered everybody up. And it was actually 2 years ago that I did it. But I was scrolling 2 years ago on my Instagram post, and I was like, oh man, that was a really good post. It was something about, your email signature. I'm like, I should repurpose that. So sometimes we just need to go back, into our Canva document, which is probably where they're all stored, or, have a better storage system than that, or just scroll back into our social media and think, wow, I could repurpose that. Slightly different words, maybe a different graphic, but, the message is the same. So,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. And you just made me think too, when you talked about the book that the gentleman had put together, like you could do that with your course, that you create, like, as you say, it's about structuring the free material that you've already put out into, a way where people can actually consume it differently. So yeah, a little mini course or even a lead magnet, those kinds of things with the content that you already have. Like they're just so easy, but often we just don't do the things that are sitting right in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I could talk about repurposing content all day. And, it is one of those things that sometimes you need help. Sometimes, having a virtual assistant and, asking them to help you repurpose content or repurposing it while you're publishing it the first time, and just rescheduling it can really help. Um, I know you mentioned at the start of the podcast about, getting into a good habit of writing content and perhaps doing it every day type of thing. But do you have any other tips for sort of developing good content writing practices?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things I could talk about. I think one of the great things that you can start to do is just to actually take a look at how you structure your content. I think it's really important, especially when we're writing for digital, to remember that people have got really short attention spans and that they are skimming and scanning your content on screen. It's not like reading a novel where you read every word. So I think it's important to firstly factor in lots of white space on the screen to actually allow people's eyes to kind of take in what's there. To look at, the way that you structure your content in terms of headings and subheadings and breaking up that content, helping people understand like what's most important, what's the hierarchy in which I should be reading this content. I love to use, bullet points and things like that to help to keep content, coming across really clearly rather than, huge slabs of paragraph text, which again, people just don't absorb. They are skimming, they are just looking for the important information. Really clear calls to action that need to stand out on the page as well. You might even, put a colored button on them, things like that to help them actually physically stand out. But I think just going and looking through your content, whether that be your newsletters, I mean, you probably get lots of newsletters in your inbox that are just literally like paragraph after paragraph with no kind of organization. It's amazing what a little bit of, subheadings and bullet points can do to just help people understand like what's there and also just digest it in a much easier way. So it's a lot of the time good copywriting is as much about organizing information as it is about the writing itself, because there's no point in having all this great stuff in there if nobody's going to consume it. So it's just really important to think about the way that we actually structure it for readability.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that there's an email newsletter that I get, and up the top, it's kind of like all the things in bullet points that is going to be down the bottom. So it's kind of like, I'm going to talk about this, 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 and this, and this, and then it's like, have a great day, blah blah blah, and then it starts with the first heading, and then it might be, I don't know, a couple of hundred words, then the second heading, but you already know up the top. You don't have to scroll to see the headings. You don't have to scroll to see, is this going to be something I want to invest 5 minutes reading or not? You kind of read the headings. And that was a bit of a lesson to me because, in one of my businesses, we have big, long newsletters. And I often think, how far do people get down the line before they go, yeah, I'm out? Yeah, so it was kind of like, right, I need to restructure the way I do my newsletters. So, and I think that is some of the way that we can get better at our copy as well, is watch for what other people are doing and what we react with as well. So sometimes, seeing the lessons or seeing other people's copies, like, that's why that they do
Oh,
that.
yeah, for sure. And I love things like, saving really good emails that you get, like subject lines that make you click and things like that,
Yeah.
so that you've got a little bit of a swipe file ready to go of like
Mm.
ideas to kind of inspire you as well. Something else I wanted to mention just in terms of getting better at, copywriting skills in general, is really taking some time to think about, like, not just what the features are of, the service or product that you provide, but actually really digging into the benefits of those as well. Because so often the tendency is to stop at talking about the features of something, like the fabric that a top is made from, or, the 8 weeks that a course might run for. But it's like, well, again, thinking of, putting ourselves in the shoes of our prospects. What is in it for me? Like, what's the benefit of that? Well, the benefit of the fabric of the top might be that, it feels so luxurious when you wear it. It's really easy to take care of, so it lasts longer, those types of things. Or, an 8-week course might be designed to keep your momentum building while you're working through some content, or to keep you on track with, weekly accountability. It might fit into the school term, like those sorts of things. So really, again, thinking about what are the benefits of the services and products we have, not just the features. So that's something that I think we could probably all do with a little bit of a read over our website copy in particular, just to make sure that we're doing that regularly.
Yeah, I love that, especially for if, my listener happens to be in the e-commerce world. Please, really wind that back, 60 seconds and listen to that again. Um, just dealing with the features isn't going to inspire me to buy most of the time. Telling me what's in it for me, just might get me over the line with the sale. So I think that's just so much gold right there. And even if you've heard it before, my beautiful listener, please, did you act on it? Sometimes we hear things, but we're like, oh yeah, I know that, but do we actually practice it? So that's really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
but this has been so good. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge around copy and your tips and your tricks on how we could all get a little bit better with our copy. Is there anything that we've missed that you really wanted to say before we sign off? Like anything else?
Yeah, look, I think one thing I will just say is that for any of the copywriting stuff for small business, I think the best place you can probably start, if you dare, and I put this as a challenge to you, is to go and talk to your customers, go and talk to your audience, talk to your clients, and ask them the questions of what it's like to experience your product or service. And what you might find is some insights that you may not have gotten yourself, because it really helps us to get an objective view on things. So if you're not sure what the benefits are, ask the audience and see what they tell you, see what their experience is. And you might just, get some new little gems having those conversations.
Yeah, I love that. That's such good advice as well. And I think if we all think back to our business journey, we all know that's happened somewhere along the line that, we're thinking, we're using the right words or we're saying the right things or something, and then someone tells us something a bit left of field. You're like, okay, that's me. That's not customer centric. Thank you so much for that tip. Yeah, so good. Emma, it's been great. Thank you so much for your time today. If someone wants to get in contact and talk copy, where's the best place to get in contact with you?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. My website is the best place. It's emmamcmillancopy.com. And yeah, I run group coaching programs, one-on-one coaching. And yeah, that's all the details are there. I'm also over on Instagram at Emma McMillan Copy or on LinkedIn at Emma McMillan Copywriter. So yeah, I'd love to connect with you. Come on over and say hello.
Beautiful. Make sure you do that. I will have all those links in the show notes, of course, as well. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to talking copy with you again really soon.
Thanks so much, Jen.
So how do you feel about copywriting now? Are you going to take up Emma's little daily challenge? It really is, just as our parents told us, or perhaps as our school teachers told us, that practice does make perfect. Although probably never perfect, perhaps it should be more practice makes us continually better at what we do. People will say to me, how do you think so quickly about marketing, or how does your marketing brain work? I can't think of this, or I can't come up with ideas with that. But it's what I do marketing every single day. It's what I live and what I breathe. And of course, when you do something all the time, you become better and better at it. You retain more and more information. You see examples and you share tips and tricks. Like that's what it's about. And so copy is the same. If we just do it often, we will get better at it. Maybe never perfect, but definitely better at it. If you've got questions or you've got thoughts, then I would love for you to head into the Like-Minded Business Owners Facebook group and share them with everyone over there. Of course, all the links to Emma's website and her socials, and of course her podcast, are available in the show notes, which again are at socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/245. Or of course, you can always send me an email, jen@jendonovan.com.au, or DM me on Instagram, or give me a LinkedIn message as well. I would love to hear from you. But that's it for episode 245. If you love this episode and found it valuable, please take 30 seconds to not only leave me a rating and review, if you can do that where you are listening to your podcast, but maybe share this on your socials or drop Emma a DM in her Instagram, or send her a little message to say how valuable you found it as well. I'm sure that would mean the world to her. One goal of mine is to reach more people with this podcast. So anything you can do to help me achieve that this year, I would be extremely thankful for. But otherwise, I'll see you next week for episode 246. Thanks again to Airtree Resort for sponsoring this podcast. If you need your winter getaway, or you need to forward book something to look forward to in summer, book your summer getaway. Of course, you can find all the details of Airtree Resort at all the W's, airtreeresort.com.au. The links, of course, are in the show notes. But in the meantime, let's hang out on social and get social. On social, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and of course, LinkedIn. But whatever you do, remember, my small business peep, as my opening song says, there is no point in dreaming small.
No time like the present. Tell it like you feel it, say it proud, be true, and let us see you for the star that you are. No point in dreaming small.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Yorta Yorta people, on which I record this podcast and conduct my business today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend this respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today as well.